Hello, welcome to my channel, Rise of Edge Crusher. I'm Edge Crusher, I'm an Overwatch coach who specializes in helping bronze and silver players learn the skills they need to get out of bronze and silver, and the concept of this video is space as it relates to Overwatch. What is it, and how can you create it and use it effectively? As I mainly work with bronze and silver players, this guide is meant for them, maybe gold players, so if you're above those ranks, you might not find the information here all that useful. In one sentence, space is defined as an area on the map from which your teammates can deal damage or put pressure on the enemy team, with no or minimal risk of taking damage themselves, and very little pressure being put on them. To give a practical example of what I mean by that, suppose that two opposing teams each have a McCree and a Pharah, and each McCree is trying to shoot the enemy Pharah out of the sky. The first McCree looks up to get his crosshair onto the Pharah right as his Reinhardt starts swinging their hammer at the enemy team's faces. The enemy team is busy trying to get the angry German man away from them. The Mercy has to get off the Pharah to heal all the people being hit by Ryan's hammer, and McCree can easily get 3 shots onto the Pharah because no one is helping her and nothing on the ground is trying to kill him. The other McCree is also trying to kill the opposing team's Pharah, but his Reinhardt is hiding around the corner, not wanting to push in. He looks up at the Pharah, she's shooting at him, and while he's not looking at what's on the ground, he gets hooked by a Roadhog that no one is contesting, and he dies. Then you hear his team yelling, "McCree, why aren't you killing the Pharah?" The problem wasn't that the McCree in the second example there ignored the Pharah, though. It wasn't even that he couldn't land a shot. There was simply too much pressure on him for him to be able to do his job. What, on the map, is distracting the enemy team so that they can't focus on killing that McCree who's after their Pharah, that Genji who's going for their Widow, or that Mercy who's keeping your main tank at full health as he keeps pushing forward? Is it a shield? Blocking bullets from connecting with your teammates' heads? Is it a giant hammer being swung in their faces, knocking them around, and forcing them to confront the angry German man before looking at anything else? Is it a flanking DPS, forcing the enemy supports to turn around and ignore the rest of their team? Or is it even something more subtle, like the fact that your team has a Pharah to the left of the enemy team and a soldier to the right, focusing the same target from opposite angles, and the enemy team can't figure out which to shoot at first? The area of the map where you are protected by that distraction is your space, and the person causing the distraction is creating it. Now that you understand what space is, let's talk about how you can provide that distraction. If you're a main tank, managing your defensive abilities, shields, movement abilities, and damage mitigation abilities is vital to creating an effective distraction while keeping your own happy ass alive. To do this, you need to have a good understanding of what the enemy team is doing, what your own teammates are doing, and most importantly, how close you are to a corner. Think of your job as a main tank as preventing the enemy team from taking your corner away from you and trying to take the corner they're holding away from them. Corners are your best friends. The walls of the map are like infinite shields, blocking damage for you so that you can let your barrier regenerate or your cooldowns come back. Even if you're not playing the role of main tank, you should be conscious of corners and playing around them. If you're a squishy, that is, a 200 HP hero, and your main tank gets out of position or mismanages his cooldowns, you want to be around that corner so the enemy team can't just pop your head off. If you're in a situation where you can keep yourself alive, you might even be able to help your main tank survive long enough to get back to their proper position, by healing them if you're a support, and by putting pressure on the things focusing them if you're a DPS. In addition to corners, you need to develop an awareness of what the enemy team is paying the most attention to. What are they looking at, or shooting at? Are they all looking or shooting at the same thing? Or are some members of the team doing their own thing? Are any of them paying attention to you, in particular? Understanding what the enemy team is focused on, and taking odd angles that they aren't paying attention to, is a second skill in the box of tools used for creating space. This one is used mainly by mobility tanks, such as Winston or Wrecking Ball, and by flanker DPS, like Genji or Tracer. As a mobility tank, you want to engage into an area of the map where you can deal damage to the enemy team, drawing their attention onto you for a short time, then escape to safety when you have been weakened. With the enemy team focused on you, there's no pressure on your DPS or healers, allowing healers to keep you alive, and DPS to take angles that allow them to get easy damage onto enemies. If your team is able to focus a single target from multiple angles, it will die. No matter how good that player is, they can only aim in one direction at a time. As a DPS, especially a flanker, you need to be constantly aware of who on your team is being focused and who on the enemy team knows your position. You can be in an extremely aggressive position and be safe if no one on the enemy team knows that you're there, and you have a way of getting out once they do notice you. This is what makes a good Genji or Doomfist or Tracer player so devastating. By the time you know where they are, they've already gotten a kill in your backline and retreated behind cover. To make use of this, look at what the enemy team is shooting at. Is it your main tank? Is it your other DPS? If it's not you, and the person being targeted on your team can stay alive for a few seconds, you're good to go. Take a flank route that uses part of the map for cover, and position yourself behind or to the side of the enemy team. You can safely deal damage from there until you see the enemy's character model turn to face yours, at which point you need to get away. Return to the main group of your team, deal poke damage from there, and take a flank angle once again after they've forgotten about you. The last method of creating space is via sightlines. Imagine you're in a game with a really good Hanzo or Widowmaker. You poke your head around the corner, and BAM! Instantly popped off your neck, and you have to wait for a respawn. Eventually, you're afraid to move around the corner, because you know that sniper is just going to kill you again. They are controlling that sightline, forcing your team's attention onto them to survive walking through it. Sightlines can also be controlled by heroes that deal significant burst damage over a large area, such as Junkrat or Bastion, and even by the presence of a sniper of indeterminate skill. I've seen plenty of lower ranked games where a Widowmaker is missing several shots in a row, but because she's shooting down that sightline, the opposing team is scared to push. If multiple heroes on your team are able to create space for themselves, you can set up a crossfire, which allows you to attack the enemy team from multiple angles for the greatest efficacy. Suppose that your team's Reinhardt is pushing the enemy team head-on, with a McCree supplying steady frontline damage from behind his shield, while your Tracer slips undetected through a flank route and attacks a support in the far back. If the Rein and McCree are coordinating their front push with the Tracer's flank push, your team is putting the enemy team in a situation where they can either face forward, confronting the Rein and McCree while the Tracer kills everything, or they can turn around to handle the Tracer, leaving the Rein and McCree open to kill everything. This puts your team in the best position to win the fight. That concludes my video on what space is in Overwatch and how to create it. I hope you find this video helpful. If you have any questions, comments, coaching topics you'd like me to address in future videos, please leave me a comment below. Best of luck in all your Overwatch conquests!